Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Great. Today, we're heading back to ancient Rome.
Oh, fascinating period.
It really is. Specifically, we're looking at the transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire.
Big changes. A lot to unpack there.
It is. And to guide us, we're using Mary Beard's SPQR, A History of Ancient Rome.
Excellent choice. Beard's work is fantastic. She really delves into the lives of everyday Romans, not just the emperors and generals we always hear about.
Right. It's the senators, soldiers, even slaves.
Exactly. It gives us that much richer perspective, how this civilization actually worked and ultimately how it changed so drastically.
Exactly. It's not just about listing battles and dates. It's about understanding the people who lived through it all, their motivations, their struggles, their triumphs.
Absolutely. The human side of history.
So to really grasp this shift from republic to empire, well, maybe we should start at the very beginning.
Okay, sure.
With those famous founding myths. I mean, everyone knows the story of Romulus and Remus, right?
Raised by a she-wolf, destined to found Rome. Classic.
But what can a myth like that actually tell us about a civilization?
That's interesting. Myths often reveal a lot about a society's values and anxieties.
Okay, I see. Like how?
Well, take Romulus killing Remus, his own brother, to establish Rome.
Right. Brutal.
It is. And it emphasizes the role that violence played in their history. Almost like civil war was, built into their identity right from the start.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful point. So even in their origin story, there's this tension, right? Between ambition and morality, unity and conflict.
Yeah, for sure.
And that tension comes up again in another famous myth, the rape of Lucretia. This isn't just some ancient soap opera. It's a story that really sparked debate about Roman values. And this debate went on for generations.
It did. What's fascinating is how different Roman writers use this story. It's like they were wrestling with ideas about marriage, morality, the relationship between men and women.
Big questions. So we've got these foundational myths. But moving beyond those, what about real-world influences on early Rome? The Etruscans, for instance, played a pretty big role.
They did. And archaeological evidence shows us it's actually more complex than just simple conquest.
So we're talking cultural exchange here.
Right. Not just one civilization totally steamrolling another. There was art, religion, a real mixing of cultures. It all shaped early Roman identity.
So Rome wasn't just this isolated village.
No, it was connected to the wider Mediterranean world right from the start.
Fascinating. It seems like we tend to oversimplify things. Looking at history as this straightforward progression.
Yeah, it's so much messier than that. More interconnected.
Definitely. Which brings us to the transition from monarchy to republic. It's often portrayed as this clean break, right? But, was it really?
Good question. Roman historians love to play up that idea of liberty, as a core Roman value.
Of course. But how did liberty actually work in practice, especially in the early republic?
Well, we have to remember that liberty didn't have the same meaning for everyone.
Right. Different groups, different experiences.
For the patricians, the wealthy elite, it meant having a voice in government, holding those positions of power.
Makes sense.
But for the plebeians, the common people, liberty was more about, basic rights, protections.
Okay. So even in this free republic, there were these built-in inequalities.
Yeah, there were. And those led to a long, often violent struggle. We call it the conflict of the orders.
Right. This wasn't just like a polite debate, was it?
Definitely not. It was a total upheaval. It had real consequences. Take the 12 tables, for example.
A written code of law.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a huge win for the plebeians. Or think about the story of Virginia.
Oh, right. A tragic story.
She was a plebeian woman. Her fate at the hands of this corrupt patrician official, it just sparked more unrest.
These stories are so important. They remind us that history is made up of these individual lives, these experiences, and that the fight for equality and rights, well, it's constant. It's throughout human history.
Absolutely.
But while all this was happening internally, Rome was also expanding.
Across Italy.
Right, taking more territory.
Right.
Was this like some master plan, all strategic?
It's easy to assume that, but honestly, a lot of it was more opportunistic.
Oh, it's
Roman culture kind of blurred the lines between home and war. So being away from Roman territory, it practically meant you were already in conflict.
Wow. So expansion was almost like a natural extension of their way of life.
In a way, yeah. But there were also these calculated campaigns, too.
Like the Punic Wars.
Exactly, the ones against Carthage. Epic clashes, really. They had a profound impact on Roman society, especially Hannibal's invasion of Italy.
Oh, right, during the Second Punic War.
Imagine the fear A foreign army marching on your land, the very survival of Rome was at stake.
It must have been terrifying. But in the end, Rome emerged victorious. And this brings us to Polybius.
The Greek historian.
Yeah. He described the Roman political system as a mixed constitution.
Interesting guy. Polybius was fascinated by how Rome combined things, elements of monarchy, aristocracy, democracy.
On paper, it seemed balanced.
Right. But the reality, it often favored the wealthy, like the Senate, for example. It held a lot of power, and it was dominated by the patrician class.
So it makes you wonder, how did a system that claimed to be about shared power end up reinforcing those inequalities?
That's a question that still resonates today, doesn't it? How do we create systems that are truly just and equitable? It's something the Romans wrestled with, and, well, we're still wrestling with it.
Absolutely. And it's a question we'll keep exploring as we delve deeper into this transition from republic to empire. So we've been talking about these deep inequalities, within Roman society, even during the Republic.
Right, and it feels like things really started to boil over in the late 2nd and early 1st centuries BCE.
Yeah, that's when figures like the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius, and Gaius really come to the forefront.
Exactly. They were reformers. They saw firsthand what was happening, the growing gap between the wealthy elite and everyone else.
And they weren't content to just sit back and watch.
Not at all. They actually tried to change things, implement reforms.
Like land redistribution.
Yeah, and grain subsidies to help the poor. Think about it. Trying to redistribute land in ancient Rome?
I mean, that's huge. That's taking on the whole power structure.
It is. It's like they were trying to upend the entire social and economic order.
It's amazing they got as far as they did.
It really is.
But their story doesn't have a happy ending, does it?
No.
Yeah.
It ends in tragedy. Both were assassinated.
It shows just how volatile things were.
Roman politics could be brutal.
And it shows how resistant the system was to change.
Yeah, even when those changes were meant to address those really obvious inequalities.
Right. And this instability wasn't just in Rome itself. Think about the social war. This conflict with Rome's Italian allies.
It really exposed the cracks in the system, didn't it?
It did. The social war really forced the Romans to confront this question of citizenship. Who was actually considered Roman? Imagine demanding rights when you're basically seen as a conquered people.
Bold move. And it was a long, brutal fight. But in the end, Rome did extend citizenship to most of Italy.
But even then, it makes you wonder, was that genuine inclusion? Or a way to control things?
Well, power is a complex thing. And in all this turmoil, you see individuals like Marius and Sulla rising to prominence.
Both powerful generals.
Yeah, both successful in their own right. But they also exploited the chaos to further their own goals. Sulla especially, he became dictator.
Right, which was a clear sign of what was to come, the shift to one-man rule.
Exactly. It foreshadowed the rise of the empire. But before we get to that,
right.
There's another major challenge to Roman authority we need to talk about.
Okay.
The slave revolts.
Oh, wow. Yes, Spartacus.
Exactly. Here you have this figure who really embodies the fight against oppression.
Thousands of slaves rising up against their masters.
Imagine that, challenging the very foundations of Roman power.
I mean, it must have been terrifying for those in charge.
It was a desperate bid for freedom, but it also sent shockwaves through the Roman world, showed that even the mightiest empire could be vulnerable.
It's a good reminder. Power is never absolute.
It's not.
There's always that potential for pushback.
Right.
For those on the margins, to demand change.
Right.
And speaking of powerful figures, this is also when Pompey the Great comes onto the scene.
Pompey, yes. All those successful campaigns in the East.
And those ambitious building projects back in Rome.
He was blurring the lines, between successful general and something more.
Right.
He was almost a prototype emperor, wasn't he?
He was amassing all this wealth, all this power. He even had those elaborate triumphal processions, to celebrate his victories, solidify his image, this larger-than-life leader.
Yeah, like testing the waters, seeing how far he could push things.
Exactly. And then, of course, comes Julius Caesar.
A figure who really changes everything.
His conquest of Gaul. The rivalry with Pompey.
The crossing of the Rubicon.
I mean, it's remarkable how one person can have such a profound impact on history.
He was brilliant, wasn't he?
A brilliant strategist, a politician, a master of self-promotion. Think about his commentaries on the Gallic War.
Right.
They weren't just military accounts. They were propaganda, carefully crafted, to make him look good.
He understood the power of perception, and he was ambitious.
And ultimately, that ambition led to his assassination.
The senators, they thought they were saving the Republic, right?
They did. But in a way, they just sped up its
It's
demise.
ironic, isn't it?
Caesar's assassination created this power vacuum.
One that his heir, Octavian, was ready to fill.
The soon-to-be Augustus, the first Roman emperor.
Augustus was smart, a master of maneuvering. He knew that just grabbing power openly could backfire.
So he played the long game.
He did. He created a system where he had the control, but he kept up this facade of Republican traditions.
He was a restorer of peace, bringing order after all that chaos. He reformed the army, controlled the elections, even brought the Senate on board, all while saying he was upholding the values of the Republic.
It's amazing how he pulled that off.
It really is. And it wasn't just politics. He was also a master builder.
Transforming Rome itself, making it a city worthy of an empire.
Right. From the Forum to the Pantheon, those aqueducts, the temples, it was all about showcasing Roman power.
Sending that message, this is what we bring: stability, prosperity.
So out of the ashes of the Republic, a new order was born, one built on concentrated power in the hands of a single individual. But while emperors and generals dominate the stage, I'm curious, what about everyday life? How did all this affect the average Roman?
Now that's the question, isn't it? Because history is really about people, and that's what we'll dive into next. The lives of ordinary Romans, senators, soldiers, slaves. We'll see how they navigated this new world order.
Okay, so we see how the Roman Empire emerged. But what was it actually like to live in this new world? Was it all gladiators and chariots, or was there more to it?
Oh, there's always more to the story. Ancient Rome was a society full of, complexities, contradictions, just like any other. Let's peel back the layers a bit. Start with the Roman elite.
Okay, feel
We often imagine them, right? Living these lives of luxury, ease, but the reality was much more complicated.
Yeah, like take Cicero, for instance. I mean, he achieved the highest office, consul of Rome. But his life was full of ups and downs, exile, conspiracies, even the death of his daughter.
It really shows you, even in ancient Rome, power was a fickle thing.
It was. It wasn't all, banquets and lavish villas.
Not at all. Cicero's writings give us this incredible glimpse into their world, all those anxieties, the insecurities of the Roman elite. They were constantly jockeying for position, worrying about their status, their reputations.
So even at the top, there were struggles.
Definitely.
What about family life? Was it anything like what we might imagine?
Well, some similarities, some big differences. Arranged marriages were totally normal.
Yeah.
Women had very limited rights.
And childbirth?
Childbirth was dangerous. Infant mortality rates were high. Life could be precarious, even for the wealthy.
And then there's the big one, slavery. We can't talk about Roman society without acknowledging that.
No, we can't. It was built on the backs of enslaved people, a brutal reality.
Absolutely. Deeply ingrained in the economy. In everything, really.
And the experiences of those enslaved people, they varied widely. Some endured horrific treatment, others had more autonomy, even opportunities.
Right. It's a dark chapter, no question. And it's important to understand its complexity. But I'm curious, were there any glimmers of hope? Like, were there any opportunities for people to move up in the world?
There were some, freed slaves, for instance. They could become Roman citizens.
Oh, really?
And even gain wealth and influence. We know of cases where they became successful businessmen, landowners, even patrons of the arts.
So even within a system that was inherently unequal, there were these cracks where individuals could find their own way.
Yeah. Find some success.
Okay, that's interesting. Now let's shift gears a bit. Talk about religion. How did they make sense of the world? All its triumphs and tragedies.
Well, Roman religion was polytheistic.
Lots of gods and goddesses.
Tons, each with their own, domain. Responsibilities, rituals, and sacrifices were part of daily life, from big public festivals to things people did at home.
Right. And what about the emperors? Weren't they incorporated into all of this?
They were almost deified in a way.
Talk about a power move.
It was. By linking themselves to the gods, emperors could really boost their authority, create this sense of awe.
So smart.
It solidified their power in a pretty clever way.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about Rome itself, but let's zoom out. Think about the vastness of the empire.
Yeah.
How did Roman rule affect the provinces? All those lands and people far from the capital.
That's a great question. Romanization, the spread of Roman culture and institutions, it was a complex process, uneven.
Not a one-size-fits-all approach.
No. In some areas, Roman rule brought peace and prosperity. In others, it meant exploitation, conflict.
Makes sense. And how did those local populations respond to all of this? I mean, they had their own cultures, their own traditions.
They did. There was definitely adaptation. Resistance, too. Some local elites saw Roman culture as a way to get ahead. Others clung to their old ways, resisted the change.
That must have been a real clash sometime.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the Jewish revolts.
Right, right.
They're a perfect example of that. What happens when Roman authority bumps up against these local beliefs, local customs?
And then, of course, there's Christianity, this religion that starts on the fringes of the empire and ultimately spreads throughout the whole Roman world.
Changes the religious landscape of Europe.
I mean, it's incredible. It shows the power of ideas, how history can be so unpredictable. This small, persecuted sect becomes the dominant religion.
It's pretty amazing.
And it reminds us that empires, no matter how powerful, they're not static. They're always changing, shaped by forces both inside and out, by individuals, by the currents of history.
Exactly. Nothing stays the same forever.
Now, so as we wrap up this deep dive into ancient Rome, I think it's clear Rome's legacy is complicated. It's a story of ambition, power, innovation, resilience too.
Definitely. And it offers us so many lessons about the nature of citizenship, the challenges of building an empire, the human search for meaning and belonging.
Really big questions. And it makes me wonder, if you could travel back in time, what would you be most curious to see firsthand? The grandeur of the Colosseum, those heated debates in the Forum, or maybe just the simple pleasures of a Roman bathhouse.
So many possibilities. It's a world that continues to captivate us, even after all these centuries.
It does. Ancient Rome may be gone, but its impact is still felt.
It gives us insights into our own world, our own humanity.
Thanks for joining us on this journey through ancient Rome. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.